So welcome everyone to this evening's webinar. My name is William Harmon, National Ladies Football Development Officer with a remit for coach education. I'm a Kerry man, so I hope you're all well. I'm joined by my colleague Vincent Whelan. Vincent, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Good evening, everybody. Thanks a million for joining us. My name is Vinny Whelan. I am also National Development Officer, and my remit is for growth and participation. And the opposite to William, I'm based here in the capital, so there might be a bit of Dublin and Kerry banter throughout the webinar.
Good stuff. And look, as you see, everyone, it's about 70 minutes. It mightn't be that long, but it won't go over 70 minutes. And just for everyone who's come here tonight, guys, just use the chat function. If you want to engage or ask any questions, we'll do our best to monitor the chat function throughout the webinar and try and answer your questions as we go along through the webinar. If you lose connection anytime, just leave the webinar and come back in as normal, and there's no problem there. Just to let you know, guys, this is only the first of many of our coach education webinars that's going to be going on over the coming weeks and months. So on our LJFA website, you will see the list of webinars as you see in front of you there on the screen, and all the descriptions in relation to those webinars over the coming weeks. So if you enjoy tonight and you want to listen to those, please log on to the LJFA website and you'll be able to register for those events. And those events are now open to register. So as you see, guys, there's a good plethora of a difference of topics. So hopefully you'll enjoy those over the coming weeks. But tonight's webinar, let's get back to it. Tonight's webinar is specifically on how to motivate your players in your coaching session. So we're going to really narrow this down and look at the coaching session. How do we motivate our players in a coaching session? And I suppose what's important is that, and the first probably, I suppose, learning moment for us tonight is to recognize the importance of this topic, the importance of motivating our players in order to help our players achieve their goals. I think that's important, but also it's vitally important we give it the time it deserves in terms of our planning and our approach. But our approach is very much dependent on your situation. So there's a lot of coaches here tonight they have various coaching experiences. You have various coaching styles, different coaching styles. You're coaching different age cohorts. So I would ask you tonight, when we're going through the presentation, just to, I suppose, just be mindful of the approach you will take, because it will very much depend on your own situation and who you coach at the moment. So what is the outcome for tonight? Our aim, myself and Vincent, our aim is to give you ideas and practical strategies to assist with you as a coach in motivating your players through specific coaching sessions, guys. There are ideas we've tried ourselves, and there's ideas that we probably look through our research. So hopefully they'll help you over the coming weeks. If not over the coming weeks, maybe at the start of next year in your coaching practice next year. So we're going to move it on promptly. But before we start, I think it's important to understand what do we know currently about our players, and where's the evidence to back up what informs what we're going to probably put across to you today in this webinar. So we have to have an idea of why our players are coming in the door. And if you've been on previous webinars before, you probably would have seen a lot of these slides before, but we'll just go through them just to remind ourselves again. So we've done a lot of, I suppose, research over the last number of years regarding we need to get into our players' heads to understand, well, why are they coming in the gate? And we've done a lot of research across our Gate for Teens program, our player development programs, and even our underage inter-county players. And this is what they're saying. And this is the reasons why they're getting involved in our game. I think this is important for the topic that we're doing tonight, which is outlining what motivates our players. But we need to know why they're coming to us in the first place. It's fun. They're with their friends. They want to improve and develop. And I think this is important because winning wasn't high on their priority list. It's not that they didn't want to win. It was they were more interested in getting better, improving as a player. They wanted to feel healthy. They want to be part of a team. It relieves stress. But look at also the importance us as coaches have in terms of the role we have, and I suppose ensuring our players stay in our game. But also these aspects come into play in terms of motivating our players as well. I would advocate you, if you get time, to look at research done by Amanda Vitek et al. And she looked at why children and adolescents stay in sport. And they looked at what are the main reasons why children and adolescents stay in sport. And they had 81 very specific individual actions. And number 41 was winning, by the way. But on top of that list was the idea of fun. But they outlined what does fun look like. So I would recommend in your own time, we've looked at this in our previous webinars, just to give a look at that as well in your own time. And it outlines specifically what do we mean by fun. But then we need to know, well, what are the demotivators? Well, what are the things that, probably stop or prohibit our players from coming to our sessions? The lack of enjoyment is too competitive. It's all about the outcome. Social comparisons, well, you're better than her, or friends drop out. There's other things like lack of opportunity in game time. There's obviously playing with different age groups, and there's a lot of plethora of things there that we've kind of hit on other webinars as well. But look at you again, the coach, and the role you as a coach play in motivating our players to stay involved in our game. And please, I would ask you guys, to probably just take heed of that, because this is very important information. We need to know why our players are coming in to our game or in our gate, first thing to allow us to adopt the approach we need to adopt. But then we look at other theories that are going around. With the self-determination theory, you're probably all aware of this. And basically what this is, that players and people are motivated, or they learn to grow and develop and change. But there's 3 innate psychological needs that are required in order to be self-determined or to be motivated. They are competence. I feel I'm getting better. I feel I'm improving. There's autonomy in terms of having a bit of a responsibility or control in what they're doing in their coaching sessions. But also there's this relatedness, this connectivity, this coach-athlete relationship, this, I suppose, relationship with their fellow peers and their players. And they say if you're challenged and you're satisfied, you're happy in what you're trying to achieve, then you'll be more motivated and self-determined. And just these are small things that just help us in terms of, I suppose, determining why we do what we do, which we're going to go through in a few minutes. But we also need to be very cognizant of who's coming in our gates. And we also need to be aware that there's a variety of people coming to our gates. They're coming to you for different reasons, different situations. They have different backgrounds. You as a coach has a real opportunity to make a difference in a player's life. We have a responsibility to, I suppose, pay attention to all the players, to get to know them, to understand them, and to bring a bit of positivity into their lives. But also we need to understand that it's our job to create an environment that makes them feel good about themselves, that they'll keep coming back. So what are the little keys, little kind of motivational strategies we can do to assist with all this? But at the end of the day, it's like a business, as Eamon Ryan says in Cork. In terms of a feel good, stimulating, fun, challenging, positive coaching experience. This is what we're going after. That players feel good about themselves. They want to come and train again. They are motivated to come back to your sessions. And that's what tonight is fundamentally about. What are the 1-2 little nuggets of things that we can do to probably assist in this development? And for players to excel, they need to love the game first. So that's what we're really going after. So I don't know, Vincent, before I move on and we go into the nitty gritty about those key strategies, what's your thoughts on what I just covered there? What's your feeling on that before we move it on?
Thanks a million, William, and thanks for setting the scene there. With that, I suppose in terms of identifying who you are essentially dealing with, each player coming through your gates has individual differences, identifying that they're coming from different environments, that they have different experiences, the different experiences playing different sports, the different experiences not playing any sport. So recognizing those and recognizing what might motivate them, what might demotivate them as well. And just bearing those in mind. Obviously, you've only a certain amount of time in the week that you can actually interact with players, but it's bearing that in mind and being cognizant of that when you are constructing your sessions, number one, and number two, your own behaviors towards the players as you interact with them as well. But just bearing those in mind and being cognizant of those is something that you should really focus on going forward in planning your sessions in terms of motivating them.
I think you made a good point, and everybody here tonight, that we only some of us may have only just 60 minutes a week with our players. So we need to make that 60 minutes the best 60 minutes of their week, to motivate them to want to come involved. So, Vinny, we'll go through a few tips and scenarios. And please, guys, use the chat function. If you have any questions or queries, look, we'll monitor throughout and we'll try and answer as many as we go along. But hopefully throughout the next 30 minutes or so, we'll be able to give you a few ideas to hopefully help in your coaching approach. So the first one we're looking at, tip one, is to recognize the importance of the psychosocial strength. So in the player pathway, in order to develop a player, we need to develop them technically with the skills of the game, physically, which would be athletic development, running, jumping, turning, twisting. Tactical is awareness of space, but the psychosocial lifestyle element is the area that we feel, is something that we as coaches need to just hone in a small bit more on. We feel it's vitally important we give it the time it requires. So, okay, William, you're saying to me, what does that look like in a session, in a training session? What it looks like to me is when the players come in the gate, I'll greet him with a smile. Now, if I'm not planning organized, I'll be out putting cones out. Then I won't be able to greet him with a smile because I'll be more interested in my cones. It's asking players before the session starts, tell me, how was your day today? How was school today? How was work today? To me, developing the psychosocial lifestyle is understanding other commitments. To me, it's them feeling valued by asking these questions, by finding out a bit more about my players outside of the football session. Geez, I know you had your exams today. How did you get on? That sort of thing. And also, which we'll hit on later on, it's about how we get players involved in the session. But to me, that's a very simplistic tip that I think we can all do. I think we can all achieve this. We need to give this element, this area of the 4 strands to develop a player, a bit more thought and understand the importance of it. The psychosocial lifestyle element, smile, ask them how their life is, how are things going, how did the exam go, getting to know the player. When you get to know the player, you're now developing that, this kind of a sense of the coach, recognizes me. The coach makes me feel valued. The coach is interested. He cares or she cares. And I think that's very important. And before I move it on, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I suppose just to kind of reinforce what you were saying there, William, we often hear, coach the player, not the sport, but interact with the person, not the player as well. So understanding that person, understanding that you might be the only smile that they've got all day. That you could be setting the whole tone for the whole session with that first little interaction. And maybe that first question about how their day went or how their exams went, that's the psychosocial end of it. That's understanding the person and the player. And you can really set the tone for the rest of the session there with those first few interactions.
Exactly. But I don't know, Vinny, do we put enough thought into this element or this section or this strand of the player pathway? It's vitally important, I believe. To me, I think it's important I'm there 20 minutes beforehand. At least then I can engage with players that come in, and I use that 20 minutes just to talk to players. And I just think that's just tip 1. That's a simple tip now we can all achieve. I think we all can achieve that in our next session. Let's go to the next one. Tip number 2, our coaching styles, but understanding what makes your players, I suppose, tick and probably develop. Now, think about your training session. I guarantee you, say 24 players. I guarantee you when we go through these, you can nearly think of all the players that slot into these various, I suppose, categories as we go along. And you are going to have these in every session. So go back to the previous slide. If you know your players, you'll be able to probably, I suppose, link in and engage with your players a lot better. So let's go through them here. I can guarantee you now, the players will come into your head as we go along through here. So the player that comes in, player A, highly motivated, highly skilled, really good footballer. Coaching style, Vincent, if you're coaching this player and the coach is listening tonight, how would you probably motivate this player so that she gets a meaningful and she's motivated in your session? What would you do by delegation?
You need to understand, number 1, that they have high functionality, that they're highly skilled, highly motivated. So essentially you're empowering them and trusting them within the session. I suppose in terms of in coaching, a simple sentence that you could, I suppose, use when coaching them is, here is the task I want you to execute. Okay, it's very simple. Here's the task. I want you to execute it. Okay. There's no more needed there. They are already highly motivated to go off and execute it. They're skilled, enabled to execute it. So let them off.
Let them off. And also one that could be there is, and we'll speak about later on in terms of, we've 1 or 2 other ideas that could probably develop that player as well, to challenge them more. We'll keep that down the road. The low motivation, low skill. That player, guys, that comes into your session and they don't look as if they want to be there. You know what I mean? Like they're low motivated. They probably don't feel they're good enough. Well, how do we motivate them in the session? What kind of coaching style, Vinny? You're a good coach, Vinny. Tell me from a direct point of view, what do we mean by direct, or what does that look like in a session?
One, I don't know who's been telling fibs about me anyway, but I try my best. But they need a lot of direction and a lot of attention. Okay, so player B needs a lot of direction. They require a lot of positive reinforcement. Okay, on what they're doing. Okay, you're doing brilliantly. Well done. Keep it up. That's much better than last week. You know, because they have that low motivation, you need to tap into that. You need to be able to motivate them in a way that they may not have experienced before. Okay. And in terms of, I suppose, language that you would use around requiring them to do a task. So I would say, here's what I need you to do. Here's when I need you to do it. Here's where I need you to do it and how. So you're giving a lot of direction in there, but obviously because of the type of player that they are, low motivation and low skill, you need to be that attentive and that descriptive in terms of what you want to achieve with that player.
Excellent. So I think there is like, come here to me. Look, we're going to work on the punt kick. I'm going to help you through this now. I'm going to help you through this. I'm going to be with you until you achieve success with it. I think that's really something, and I think if you've more than one coach with you in a coaching group, then you could probably assign someone to this player to say, listen, we're going to do a kicking drill in a minute. Will you make sure you're with her now and make sure she achieves success through feedback? I think, Vinny, that's a great, I suppose, tip to have in relation to that. Here's the highly motivated. Vinny, the player that comes in, has all the latest gear, looks the part, but if you ask her to kick a point over the bar, things may not go well for her. So the highly motivated, low skilled person, tell me, in a session, how do we motivate her in a session?
Yeah, so I suppose a player like this will be always driven to achieve. They will want to improve their skill levels. Okay, so I suppose in that it's a process. That's what I would say. It's a process of continuous improvement, and it may be incremental at times. Okay, but they are motivated to achieve and they are motivated to improve. So you need to give them that room to grow. Okay, so again, just in terms of around the language that I would use in terms of an interaction with that player. So I would say, if you do this, then you will create such and such an outcome, depending on what you are trying to achieve with that particular player. So you are giving them what the outcome could possibly be. They have the motivation to get there, but they'll need to work a little bit on it.
Yeah, so they have all that enthusiasm. We need to channel that enthusiasm to a specific task or skill. Come here to me now. I want you to focus on, get this right now. Let's focus on this. You know what I mean? So you're challenging that energy towards a specific task. Excellent. Jesus, Vinny, I must definitely watch one of your sessions, because in fairness, I think that'd be very good. Now, in terms of the low motivation, highly skilled. So, Josh, this player is really good footballer, but just doesn't look interested, but she's good. She's always there though, Vinny. She's always at the sessions, but she just doesn't look interested, but she never missed the session. Inspire. So what can we do here? Tell me.
Yeah, and I think again, and without pigeonholing people, I suppose everybody has come across all of these different types of players. And in terms of player D, not so much around the language that you would use or trying to figure them out, but I suppose as a coach, you very much need to discover what you can do to motivate them. And I suppose, what is their vocation, what is their niche, and in terms of being a coach, that will come from your interactions with them. That will come from knowing what drives them, what's their external interests as well. Can you tap into something that no coach or nobody has really tapped into before? So again, it's about the communication with the player there. It's about understanding their individual differences to everybody else and trying to figure out what exactly their individual motivations might be.
Yeah, there must be a reason why they're coming, Vinny. I suppose the learning we have here, Vinny, in this, and all the coaches, what is the learning here? I guarantee you now, everyone, if you were to write out the list of your panel, you'd be able to say, okay, Mary slips into there at the moment. Joan slips into, she should probably highly motivated, low skill. Is that one coaching style will not, I suppose, influence all your players. That there's a variety of coaching styles you may have to adopt, okay, in a coaching session to be able to engage and motivate your players. That's the probably point I'm trying to make. They say a supportive and autonomous coaching style is the best for a female player. But if you have a few coaches with you, okay, you all have different coaching styles. So therefore, in a session, if you know your players, going back to the original slide, you know that when you're doing certain tasks or activities, that maybe you can assign some of your coaching staff or your assistants with you or yourself will be able to probably just adopt the appropriate coaching style to the player that's within your session. And that's getting more individualized. That's then increasing the motivation of those players because they're getting that individual attention. But you need to know your players. I hope that helped. I hope that helped in terms of getting an understanding of the importance of coaching styles, and that not every player, everybody's different motivations, everybody's different ability levels coming to your session. You need to recognize where they all are at in their own journey as players, and then apply the appropriate coaching style. And I can guarantee you, players will go in and out of these boxes through each of those coaching sessions. If there's anything coming through the chat, you can let me know, Vinny, but I'll move it on to the next slide. So tip number 3. Okay, let's get there. Female players are inquisitive. They want to know the why. So you better know your why. It's basically what I'm saying to you. I have no problem saying when I coach female players, it really developed me as a coach, because if I didn't know why I was doing something, I was in trouble, because they'll always ask you why you're doing something. So it's important players understand why you're doing an activity. So what does that look like in your coaching session on Tuesday night? Okay, we're doing this activity today, girls, because it's going to help us with our forward play, because it's going to help us with our defensive shape, because it's going to make us better tacklers. So if players are unsure of the why, or they're unsure why you're doing a certain activity, then it could lead to demotivation, is the point I'm trying to say. So knowing the why is a psychological trigger to the desired action. And this is applicable in particular to female sports in terms of they want to know why. So if you fill that void in terms of explaining why you're doing something, then it leads to a motivational trigger in terms of meeting your desired aim. So if you want to play a certain way, then you're going to do activities that are going to help you achieve that. If the players are aware of why you're doing something, then they're going to buy into it more, and they'll want to get more motivated to achieve the outcome. So that's just in relation to that one. So Vinny, is there anything there or anything in the chat function before I move it on?
Nothing in the chat function. We just had a question about the slides. Just in terms of that, just to, I suppose, reinforce what William was saying, without that psychological trigger, and I suppose we've all seen it, a player coming home from training, the question is, what did you do in training tonight? Oh, we did a bit of kicking. There's no motivation there. There is no fluidity from the last session to this session to the next session. That psychological trigger is not there. Therefore, the motivation is going to be completely lacking, and any desire to improve from a starting point to a continuous is not present.
And Joe, Vinny, sometimes we have this perception we have to have the most advanced drills and activities. Do you know what? It'll make me look really good. The more complex the activity is, the better. I would say no. The activity, once it meets your outcome of what you're trying to achieve, can be as simple as it wants to be. But once the players know why you're doing something, that's the key to the whole thing. So hopefully that helped you with that one. Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's go. Ensure your coaching sessions have a good flow. Now, this is all kind of, I suppose, interlinked. So structure your session properly. Have a clear purpose. And this is the point I'm going back to earlier on. If you don't know why you're doing certain activities or what the outcome of your session is, then how are you going to apply appropriate activities to help you with that? Then the players will go, well, this is all over the shop. We're doing kicking one day. Geez, we don't even know why we're doing something. It's vitally important that you have a clear purpose of your why, of your purpose of your session. Plan for your stoppages. Going back to the point of, remember I said earlier on about the psychosocial, and I spoke about involving players. Then think about, if you want to involve players, if they're involved in something, they'll be enthusiastic, they'll be motivated, they'll want to try and find the solutions to the problems. Then you need to ask the right questions. So plan your questions. Only bring in players when it's necessary. I would say, guys, no more than 3 times, 4 times you bring in players in sessions. When you bring them in, there's a reason why you brought them in, and they understand why you're bringing them in. There's a real clarity around that, okay? But if you want players to be really, really enthused or motivated or keep a flow, then add a bit of a time frame to your activities. Okay, we're doing this activity for 3 minutes, okay? That will increase the intensity, but also the motivation levels. So there's a few little pointers there that might help you in terms of keeping players motivated in your sessions. Less of the standing around with the hands folded, more engagement and involvement with the players. So a clear purpose in your session plan. What questions will you ask them when you bring them in? Only bring them in 2 or 3 times that are meaningful, and then add time to your activities. Vinny, what's your thoughts on that? Or is there anything there really you'd like to add?
There's a question in from Gregory there. just I suppose in the last couple of slides, a very, very good question. Given different coaches have different styles, would you propose that a group stay with a particular coach for a full session to align the group with the coaching style?
I go back to my point I made earlier on, Gregory. It depends. The approach depends on your own coaching situation. You know your players. It may be that you know your players, you know your coach, and you say, you know what, that coach now would work very well with this group of players. You may in a session apply what you just said there, Gregory, in terms of, you know what, you're going to stick with this group for this session. Then yeah, try that out, Gregory. See how it goes. You know what I mean? All you can do is try it out. So I would say, again, your approach depends on the situation. You know your players, Gregory, than I do. You know your coaches. If you think that certain coaches interact good with other, with certain players in terms of their coaching styles and their personalities, then yes, then you can probably buddy those up in a certain session. So yeah, why not try it? See how you get on with it, Gregory. Let me know how you get on. And I'd be happy to probably engage you over the coming weeks to see how you get on with that. Okay, we'll move it on. I hope I'm not going too fast, guys. But the next one's about involving players in the decision-making process. But again, though, this goes back to developing a culture where the players coming to your sessions, okay, are involved in the decision-making process. In other words, they're involved in finding the solutions to your problems. So you could say, last week, guys, we played a game and you were very bunched. We need to create more space. What do you think we should do? There's nothing wrong, coaches, with not having all the answers. Nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with throwing it out to the group and getting them to have discussions and come up with solutions. They mightn't have the answers, but sure, why not ask them? You never know what could come from those discussions. So let's create a culture where when the players come to your sessions, they know they're going to be involved in the decision-making process. Less cross-having of the hands, less listening and telling. They're more now involved. So I would say to you here, to help that in your sessions, consider your group sizes. So the smaller groups are better for interaction and participation. So I would say, right, all the forwards get into two groups there, have a chat about this topic for 5 minutes. I'm going to go down here and do a bit of work with the defenders. We're going to come back in a few minutes and let's see what he come up with, and we'll try it out in a game. Okay, so little things like that could help with just igniting that bit of, you're probably coaching under eights. You're going, Jesus, William, you can't do that with under eights. But if you play a game of piggy in the middle, whereby one player is trying to get the ball off the other two players, you could bring the players in and say, what are we trying to do here? Oh, we're trying to keep the ball away from Mary. Right. Well, tell me, what do you think we should do? Oh, we have to run away from Mary. Right, well, fair enough. Do you get what I'm saying? So your approach and your behavior depends on your situation, but it's still promoting engagement of players. Involve them. Vinny, I don't know what your thoughts on that is, in terms of that involvement of players in the decision-making process.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a motivating factor to consider and to implement in your sessions. The players will tell you quick enough what they have experienced in a match situation or in training the previous week. So it's almost like guided discovery. If you ask them the question, you say, okay, what did we notice about the forward play last week? Now, you might need to tease that out a little bit, and you might need to say, okay, so you felt that, there wasn't enough space. Do you feel like you were bunching a little bit? Okay, yeah, we were bunching a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to leave you for a few minutes. I'm going to go off down and work with the backs. By the time I come back, we will have, a framework of a strategy devised. And again, the players know themselves. They know their teammates. They might turn around and say, okay, do you know what? Jessica is, she's got pace to burn. So what'll happen is she'll make a dart out to the 45. She'll get the ball. The rest of us, I'll drift over here. She'll drift there. We'll create space for her to knife through the middle. Okay. They've come up with that themselves, knowing their teammates, knowing what they can do themselves, and knowing what the issues were from the previous week.
And coming to that, Vinny, you could flip it on the other side, so maybe your players are not ready for that sort of level of discussion, but you can apply a pattern of play and say, I'm going to try something out here now. It's a pattern to try and create space. Now come on in, tell me, what do you think of that? What did you think of that? And so there's again, if the players aren't, I suppose, emotionally ready for that kind of discussion or letting them off on their own, okay, maybe you tease them and give them something to try out and then get their thoughts on something. So there's many ways we can go about things. This evidence of improvement mastery approach is the next tip. And I think if you can develop your players, guys, internally where they want to develop and improve, I think you'll go a long way now. I think you will. But If you don't know what you're looking for, how can you give clear, positive, meaningful feedback? This is the key. Players respond to good communication, good listening, frequent feedback. This is what players want. So we know they want this. So if a player is finding it difficult to execute a kick pass or a high catch, then you giving clear, positive, meaningful feedback will really, that player will feel valued and will value that and will motivate him to be better. So come here. You're actually improving. You're doing well with the high catch. But you know what? If you just keep your eye on the ball, hands outstretched over the head, that'll help your technique and you'll catch the ball more times or not. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you don't know what you're looking for, then how can you give meaningful feedback? But giving that meaningful feedback to players love it. Give mini goals, provide targets. So I give an example of this. Right, guys, I'm giving you 2 minutes. You all have a ball. You got to go out around the cone and kick as many points as you can as possible in 2 minutes. Off you go. And they go out. They're kicking points. Now tell me how many scores you all get. I got 10, I got 15, I got 12. Right, okay. Now, here is the key teaching point of the kicking technique. All right, shoulder to the goals, hook kick, eye on the ball, drop the ball in your hand, kicking with, and follow through. Now, I'm going to give you another 2 minutes and see now can you beat your own score. Wow. Now they're going to go back really heightened in their execution of the skill, and you're giving them a little mini target or mini goals. Female players love kind of targets, goals. So that's just a kind of an idea. And this coach play is a similar scenario in terms of you let them play a game. Say it was 5v5 possession game. You just let them play, just observe it. Then you bring them in and say, okay, what's breaking down this game? What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to get our ball. We're trying to get a hand pass to our players. Okay, but it's not working. The ball is being dropped, and we're not finding our players. Okay, well, what do you think can we do better next time? And they'd have a chat, and they come back. Now let's go back and play the game again. Now for you, you're seeing is there improvement, but the players will experience improvement. They'll be experiencing. You might get it right in one session, but they're experiencing improvement. So I would advocate if you're playing a game, stop, play it again, stop if you have to, and play it again. By the third time, you should see improvement, but the players will also feel improvement, if that makes sense. So, Vinny, I don't know about that kind of, that setting targets, that, let them play and kind of discuss the solutions and go and play it again. What's your thoughts on that sort of, in terms of motivating players, Vinny?
Again, they've experienced play, okay, for the first, say, portion of an activity or of a session. They've experienced it, and players themselves will know exactly what if you've communicated with them correctly, they should already know then what you're trying to achieve. Take them back in after they've played. What did they notice? Where do they think we should go with it? So ask those questions of them. Where do you think we should go with this? What do we need to do next? What do we need to amend? What do we need to improve on? And then go off and do it again and execute what exactly the solutions that they have come up with.
Excellent. Well done.
There's a couple of questions just come in there before we move on.
Yeah.
Carmelo, for young kids, how would you coach the group of lesser skilled players to improve without holding back the stronger ones or making it obvious that the two groups are different?
We're going to hit that in the next coming slides. So I'll hold that one, Carmelo. So hold on. We're going to answer that in a few minutes.
Okay. Tom. Thanks, Tom. With regards to an under 14 team, two best friends fall out, both strong players whose performances drop. They avoid each other in training and in games and avoid passing to each other. Both sets of parents know and probably would be okay with us intervening because they have failed to get them back talking. Any suggestions? I'm at the point where I need to speak with them, but should that be individually or together?
I would say you need to nip it in the bud. I think it's very important. Don't I suppose, ignore the issue. I think no harm having a chat with the players, either individually, your players, whether individually or together works, and just have an open conversation of, tell me, look, tell me what's going on. How can we, is there anything we can do to assist us? Whatever. Just, I think, ask those questions. I think nip in the bud. And I think if we have to bring the parents to discuss that, it'll be the next stage. But I think in terms of those players, really, I think you need to nip in the bud. If you recognize something, you need to ask the questions. Look, I noticed I noticed that, the things are not going, tell me, is there anything, is there anything wrong? Again, that's going back to caring about the player. I think you need to nip in the bud and ask the question. Individually or as a group together, your players, it's best you decide on what's the best approach there regarding same.
That's a great point, William. Again, it does go back to the wider psychosocial, doesn't it?
It goes back to knowing your players. And if you notice something that's out of kilter, then just nip in the bud. Go and ask the questions. Don't let it fester. That's what I always say.
Just one more there, if you don't mind. So during a game, a girl questions the team play and says the subs need to be made. What or how do you go?
Yeah, that one really goes back to I suppose your rules and regulations. And I would say to that one is at the start of the year, always have your rules and regulations laid out. I suppose it's not specific to this one, but I will answer as it comes. But at the start of the year, how we treat each other, how we engage with each other. So in our training sessions and also in games, I think it's very important. There's a clarity around the guidelines and how we, I suppose, apply ourselves and how we engage with each other and how we interact with each other and how we challenge each other. I think it's very important that's very clear at the very start of the year, so that when it comes to this scenario, this won't arise. You can remind them of, okay, listen, this is where we're at, this is what we're trying to achieve. I think anybody that starts undermining, I suppose, the coach, then I think you're gone too far. I think you need to nip that earlier in the year in terms of your guidelines, your approach, and how we're going to behave with each other as players and as coaches and players. That's my thought. That's what I do myself, so I hope that helps. Okay, so challenge the players appropriately. And this is the question that Carmelo had in terms of integrate players and stability. And I do believe, guys, that in order for players to develop and improve, they need to experience, different challenges. Okay. So if the player who is perceived not so good, then they need to be able to, I suppose, play against the player that, is perceived better than them. So I do believe mixing the abilities every now and then is important. I think that's important where they're challenged appropriately. But then what about the player who is, say, for example, perceived to be the stronger player? Then we need to apply different challenges so she can be motivated in the same game. So, for example, I might say to a player, you kick off your left leg, Mary. I want to see in this game, you're kicking off your left leg, while the other players can kick off their right leg. Okay, so you're applying different conditions and scenarios to certain players to challenge them appropriately within a game. Okay, and that's important. And I would be open about that at the very start. I'd be open about it before the game starts. I'm going to apply different scenarios and challenges to various players here to challenge them accordingly. So I would actually say to them, come here, Mary, I'm going to challenge you now. I'm going to ask you, okay, you're going to kick off your left leg for this game, okay? And then they can, the other players kick off the right. But then I'd have a situation whereby they can play the normal rules as well. So they experience that as well. But I definitely think there's for and against in terms of, I suppose, separating, making sure they're all of similar ability levels. But I do also believe it's important that all ability levels experience, I suppose, development together as well. And I think we can't, for players, I've never seen players develop not being challenged against players of better, perceived better ability. So I think that's vitally important. I don't know what your thoughts on that, but I would be of the ilk of, working together in their individual pods is important, but also mixing and matching is important as well.
Yeah, it goes back to the individual differences of the players again. You might have a scenario where you have a cohort of players who are highly skilled and highly motivated. And how do you motivate them even further? It might be, it's a balancing act. It's a very, very delicate situation to deal with. Because players are not silly. They will understand what's going on. I'm being put in this team and I'm being put in this team for a specific reason. But you could overload or underload. You could put maybe 6 of your best players against maybe 10 of your highly motivated, less skilled players. To really give them that bit of a challenge. Look, there's more of them. We've acknowledged that you are highly skilled, highly motivated, but let's take that motivation up to a higher level. Let's continue to have you motivated, because it's very, very easy for a player to get demotivated. If a training session is not challenging enough, if it's not varied enough, your highly motivated, highly skilled players can quickly become demotivated, and everything else drops. So you could possibly take players and, as I said, overload the other team 10v6, and get them to try and break down maybe a defensive wall in front. they will find the challenge in that. As we said about Vissek's study, there's 81 specific actions and behaviors in terms of fun. If you're highly motivated players and highly skilled players, some of their fun might be trying to pick holes in more, and or coming up against more players. That might be their fun. That challenge might be their fun, and it's about identifying that and working with that in terms of.
I like that scenario of an overload game. 6v8. You know what I mean? Or a 9v7, the overload game. I like that, Vincent, in terms of, again, it's just think outside the box, guys. Just think outside the box. I do believe mixing the ability levels, being clever in how you do that is vitally important, and keep everybody motivated, because the player who's not as skilled, if they do something really well in that game, that could bring them on twofold. And the player who's really highly skilled and motivated, give the player to the player who's less skilled and motivated, then that will increase their confidence. So it's vitally important to create a culture whereby we're all improving development, but we all have a role to improve our fellow player as well. So I hope that helps and that answers the question as well. Okay, we're nearly there. In terms of fun and the element of fun, it's vitally important, guys. You want players to be motivated, but you want them to enjoy your sessions and as well. So don't be afraid to put something simple, a team game or a fun game into your sessions every now and then. Don't be afraid to do that, because that develops that kind of enthusiasm and want to be winning your sessions as well. So it just takes away. So I think it's vitally important you put some sort of fun game. But how do you measure fun? And it's just a simple idea you could use is, well, how many smiles are our players having in the session tonight? How many times do they smile tonight? You know what I mean? How many times they engage tonight? So things like that will help you in terms of engage your fun. But it'll motivate, because they know the players know, you know what? There's more to football as well. We're having a bit of fun here with a fun game or whatever it may be. And just think outside the box with that in terms of just throwing in something different just to keep the energy levels high and the enthusiasm high regarding that. So I suppose sense of identity and sense of belonging, going back to that study in terms of the swag, wearing the club gear. So I would say to you, guys, when you're coming down to the club, down to training, wear the club gear. Be motivated. If they have the gear, if they haven't, it's not the end of the world. But wear your gear, have the swag, it kind of gives a sense of belonging, and it'll motivate them to be involved and stay involved because they had that sense of belonging. Maybe have a chant or a motto or a song. I know the AFL do a lot of that, whereby, at the end of every session, we do a certain chant, or we have a certain motto. That's something that really resonates with the female player. So it's things like that really, to develop that team ethic, that sense of belonging, that identity is vitally important. I don't know, Vincent, have you any thoughts around that fun or that sense of belonging that you'd like to say tonight?
Yeah, of course. I'm looking at the 2 points there, and the first thing that jumps out at me is, I suppose, our Gaelic for Girls program.
Yeah.
And Gaelic, I suppose, to a certain extent, Gaelic for teens as well. They take part in the program. It's new players coming into a club, and they straight away have the Gaelic for Girls jersey at the end of it. They identify with each other. They identify as a group. They're motivated to come back and join the club, and that's how it works so well as a recruitment tool. And then I suppose something then that we introduced this year as a result of Dr. Orla Farmer's Gaelic for Girls study that you referenced earlier on was the Gaelic for Girls dance. And we gave teams and clubs and new players the opportunity to construct their own dance and to film it and to send it into us. So they were picking Ed Sheeran songs, and you're really empowering a bit of motivation here. For them to integrate as a group. They'll want to come back to train. They'll have that motivation to turn up every week. We learned the first part of the dance last week. We'll go and we'll learn part 2 this week, or we've nailed dance number 1. Let's go for dance number 2. So all these small things, and I suppose William referenced there with the AFL. They're very good at creating that group cohesion and that group motivation with the chants and the songs. If anybody ever watches it, the camera pans into the changing room afterwards, and they'll all be arm in arm. And the men's game is no different either. They do the exact same there, and I suppose they create that. They create that from the start. But I suppose for ourselves, it's kind of parish and community and everything else. But imagine if you could marry those two. You have your sense of identity from your parish, your community, your club gear, and then you're introducing this song or motto or chant on top of it. talk about group cohesion and motivation to stay involved. That's a huge factor. And I think it can't be overlooked, the importance of implementing or introducing these things to your team environment.
100%. You get a bit of competition, put them into small groups. In 3 weeks' time, I want you to come up with a dance with a ball. You know what I mean? Have a bit of crack with it, or a song. Sure, why not? Try it. Sure, why not? Okay, we're getting towards the end of our slides. We'll go through the next few tips in terms of giving players choice and responsibility. And this is important because in order to motivate, and go back to the slides we said earlier on about the research, you need to ask your players as well for their perspective. So after a session, tell me, what did you like about the session tonight? What didn't you like? What do you think we can improve on here in these sessions to make them more meaningful or more motivating? What do you think is going well? Don't be afraid to ask players for their opinion and thoughts and perspectives on your coaching, because therefore then you're getting important information that will help you motivate those players over the coming weeks. Sometimes we don't ask the information because we were afraid of what we might hear back, but all feedback is good feedback, positive or negative. So don't be afraid to ask players for their thoughts and perspectives. Maybe get them to select a warm-up. Maybe get them to do the activities. You know what now next week? Mary, Joan, and Sheila, I want to have a fun game now with the group next week. Will you go away and think about it for the week? And Joe, at the end of the session next week, you can do it. You know what I mean? So things like that, just to bring a different angle to the whole thing that will help them motivate, feel valued, feel a sense of belonging. Just small little ideas that maybe might help you. This positive reinforcement, reward, and recognition, as far as I know, this is our second last slide. So in terms of, acknowledge and reward good behavior. So when one of your players does something well, nail it with a simple well done. How many times in session do we always go, well done, keep it going, well done. Even though Mary kicked 4 wides, well done, keep it going, well done. But what I would suggest in terms of your sessions is when someone does something well, then you use positive reinforcement in terms of your buzzwords, which could be well done. Because the player knows they've done it well. Now you're giving them reinforcement from a verbal sense. Now they're feeling more motivated to do better and keep at it. So I always say catch players doing things well, then reward them with a simple well done, or do you know what, I spotted you there, keep that going. And you can have tangible awards where the players can come up with, okay, if we win the game, whoever wins the mini leagues in the session get a certain award. Okay, so that's something that the players could have a bit of feedback on and a bit of, I suppose, interaction with it as well. And I suppose the other one I was saying earlier on in terms of that, that feedback, and catching players doing well. But when you have players, guys, it's vitally important that you give them that, this sense of, 6 weeks ago, come here. 6 weeks ago, you couldn't kick the ball 20 meters. Look at you now. Geez, you can kick the ball 40 meters. Do you see how you're improving? So giving them that kind of, I suppose, that recognition for their effort and their probably development is very important, but you need to be able to, I suppose, spot those things and recognize those things. I suppose this one in terms of active role model, the last tip of the night, what is that, Vince, in terms of, I suppose, before we go into this idea of, winning games and losing games and how it could affect motivation, this active role modeling, what's around this?
Yeah, so again, looking at one of the studies that you referenced earlier on from Orla Farmer in UCC, was the role that role models can take in terms of both player recruitment, player retention, and indeed motivation of players as well. And I would kind of look at it from 2 aspects. So if I looked at it from, say, maybe an adult team's aspect, that if the adult, the coach of the adult team said, look, I'd love you to go down and help maybe with the under 8s, under 9s, under 10s, just maybe even once a month to help them, improve their skills, or maybe just to see that we're all one club and here's the person to aim for. If that adult player then turns around at the weekend and is, kitted out and ready to go, or on a Wednesday night ready to go for a championship match, and next of all they turn around, they see their under 9s standing there in their club kit supporting them during a game, their next training session, I can guarantee you, they're going to understand that going forward, I'm actually a person of importance in the club. I'm now a role model for somebody. It can be a huge motivating factor that if a coach can touch on that and say, do you remember your match last week when you actually saw the girl stand there on the sideline? That's the way it's going to be from now on. I would look at that and I flip it around. I'm now at the under 8 or 9 girls' shoes. So I'm looking at it going, this adult player has taken time to come to my training session. I have seen her play. I want to be like her. That's going to motivate me to come back. It's going to motivate me to practice my skills either in the training session or at home. So active role modeling can be hugely important in terms of, number one, connecting the dots within a club, and number two, helping players on both ends of the spectrum to be motivated within their sessions to improve by using that active role modeling model and implementing that within the club setting.
That's excellent. And I think what we could do there is, like, in terms, but also you're developing future coaches as well at the older age group, in terms of having a rota system that they don't have to be at every coaching session. You could do a rota system where they're in help with the underage, but also you're probably developing future coaches, because if they enjoy that, they'll probably be future coaches as well. But that's a side note on that. I'm sure everybody's going. So I hope those tips gave you a few ideas, that will help motivate your players, and try out one or two of them. And please give me an email, give myself and Vinny an email. Let us know how things are going, or if there are any specific questions on anything, just give us an email. We'd be only happy to give our thoughts and advice, or even we'd love to learn from you and what you've done as well. But this is a question. Does losing impact our motivation and training sessions? So we keep losing games, William. We'll never win a game. Does that impact motivation? Of course it does. Of course it does. However, how you approach the season from the very start and how you approach every session will probably limit the impact of this in terms of the motivation of your players. So you need to be very clear on what the outcome is. Girls, go back to why you're here. You're here to be with your friends. You're here to enjoy yourselves. You're here to improve and develop. If we all improve and develop by the end of the year, then we've done great. If we win games by doing that, even better again. But for now, let's try and get better at every session. And we'll use the games as a yardstick to measure improvement, as Liam Morgan says. It's a learning opportunity. The games are all about showing us how much we've improved. We've lost by 6 goals last week, but you know what? We lost by 3 goals this week. I know that sounds, but you know what? We have improved. Okay, we only scored 4 points last week. Jesus, we scored 6 points today. That means we're improving. So you need to understand where you're at in terms of your group. So the approach depends on your own coaching situation. You know where your team is at in terms of their level of ability and their competence. But therefore, then, your approach needs to stick with that. So if you're going into your team saying every day, we're going to train, we're going to win the game on Sunday, or we're training out to win the championship, therefore, then they'll associate winning and failure with winning. Only one team can win at the end of the day. But I would say to you guys, to keep motivation high, always focus on the present, the now. What do we need to do now to improve and develop? What do we learn from the last game that we can improve and develop tonight? And if every player feels they're getting better, I think they'll be motivated to stay involved because of the environment you're creating. Okay, and I hope that helps in terms of answering that question. I don't know, Vinny, have you any thoughts on that before we go into the questions and wrap up the last slide?
Yeah, I suppose, again, just to kind of reinforce what you're saying there, like if winning is your first pit stop, I suppose, in terms of your motivation, you are setting yourself and the team up to fail. There's probably 9-10 teams in every league and championship. Only one can win, and most likely the odds are stacked against you straight away. In terms of the yardstick to measure improvement during games, and I always go back to the phrase that was used on an ad campaign a few years ago: most games are won when nobody's watching. So your motivation should be to improve during your training sessions. And I always go back to a friend of mine who is a director in West End in London, and I went to one of her plays in the Abbey Theatre when she was over in Ireland. And I said to her, how many, that was a brilliant performance. She said to me, you should have seen the ones from practice earlier on. They were 50 times better than that. And it kind of really hammered home to me that, the performance, okay, is fine, and there's people watching, but the real improvement comes inside the gates of the training pitch, and just use the games as the yardstick to measure the improvement.
Thank you, Vinny. Okay, so just the learning climate that we spoke about tonight. And we hope, look, the bit of feedback we gave you, or the few tips that we gave you, are helpful, and that they're transferable onto the field tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening, or in your next coaching session. But if you want to just summarize what we're going after, if you can develop a learning climate where the task is focused on the learning, task involvement, I want to see, are we improving? It's varied and differentiated, then you'll be okay. Oh, I can see we're improving. Guys, you feel you're improving. Yeah, we feel we're improving. We feel we did that better than the last time. Great, you're on a winner. Authority in terms of allow players involved in decision making, but plan your session, plan your questions. Reward improvement, effort, and social environment. Reward that. Okay, if something's done well, you need to reward that. So it's very important that you come up with those tangible rewards. That's what the group to come up with. Think about small groups. Think about mixed ability. Think about creating a cooperative learning environment. That's key. So everybody's developing and learning at different levels within their sessions. Okay, and that's what we're trying to go after. Those small groups really assist with that. 1v1s, 4v4s, for a group of 6, a group of 5. Evaluation, focus on personal improvement. Always focus on setting little mini goals or targets for your players themselves. Well, what do I need to improve on, and how am I going to get there? And then helping them achieve those goals. So you can't kick the ball 30 meters, but I'm going to help you in 6 weeks' time, you're going to be able to kick it 30 meters. That's a level of measure improvement, but you'll be doing that through setting goals and targets and your practices. And then your timing, you're flexible around your time and your task completion. So you're flexible around that. Everybody's different, and everybody will achieve various, I suppose, standards at different rates of their own learning as well. So hopefully that will help as a kind of a summary of our webinar tonight. But before I go, and Vinny, if there's 1 or 2 questions, let me know. I'd love to hear from you in the chat function, guys. What was your standout moment, or what was your awe moment from this module, as a coach, from this module, this webinar? What would it be? Tell me. So in the chat function, I'd love to hear from you. What was your standout moment? What are you going to take from this webinar that you're going to take onto your next webinar or your next coaching session, or you're going to try out? I'd love to hear that. But Vinny, if there's anything in the Q&A or chat, let me know.
I'll do my best now to try and keep up with these. Okay. So they've been coming in just over the last couple of slides. So you had a great flow there, William. So I didn't want to be jumping in and taking them, but there's some really good points and some really good questions that have come in. So if you focus on closing the gap between the lower skills and the higher skills, the team will reap the reward in training and games. Brilliant from Robert. Yeah.
I think that I agree with Robert. I believe in Robert. I was involved with a team myself this year, and we mixed abilities. Even though we were playing teams who were perceived stronger, weaker, we didn't care. We wanted to, for our own development and our own development for our players and challenging our players. We don't want our players at the age of 11, 12 thinking they're the bee's knees at age group. They have to be challenged. So we did what was right for our group. We weren't worried about other groups. So it's very important that you do mix that ability and change things up. Yeah.
Fergus, any ideas on how to encourage girls to practice in their own time?
Yeah, very good, Fergus. And on the LGFA website, Fergus, there's a booklet that you get players to probably practice at home. There's a different skill for every day where they have to achieve a certain target. So give a look at that, Fergus. It's on the LGA website. It's a booklet. But also, why don't you say to players, okay, give them a challenge between every coaching session. Okay, guys, tonight we worked on our hook kicking. We did a task whereby I gave you 2 minutes. You all got your score. So some players got 10, some got 11, some got 12. I'm going to do that task again next Tuesday night. Okay, between here and then, I want you to practice that. And I'm going to watch who has improved since we met you last. So now you're giving them a motivational to go away and practice that in their own, so that when they come back next Tuesday night, they're going to try and beat their score. So you're kind of using those small little setting goals and targets. If you go to the LGFA website, there's actually a skills booklet, 2 different two types. One that's easy, one that's medium to hard, to motivate players to practice at home. 100%. Yeah.
Perfect. Brilliant. So Marie asked the question, how do you continue to motivate players who play above their age group, who are in a lower division and are winning their games, compared to their own team who are finding games more difficult and more challenging as their team are in the top division?
Well, it goes back to, I think, going back to guidelines and where you are as a club, Marie. Okay, the understanding is that you're with your own age group, you develop with your own age group, but you have to just turn that around And I suppose getting those players to, I suppose, going back to the point that you hit earlier on about delegating, that there was a bit of delegating, that they have a role to play to assist their own group, their own peer players to develop and improve and get better. So therefore, you're kind of using that delegation task whereby, come here, you're going to help me now, in this, you're going to help me demonstrate, or you know what, I'm going to challenge you appropriately so you can help your peer coaches get better. But it goes back to, at the end of the day, clarity around your guidelines. You're going up here to be challenged as a player, but at the end of the day, here is your age group. This is where we want you to develop and really improve as a player. So I think it goes back to your guidelines, your philosophy as coaches and as a club of what's important. Here's to help you challenge, but at the end of the day, you will need to improve and develop at your own age group as well. But I think it's no problem bringing up an age group once if they want to get challenged. But you need to understand the bigger picture in terms of the role they play in their own age group. And I think explaining that to players at the very start is the most important thing, and communicating that to players. That's the key. I don't think sometimes we communicate that message appropriately.
Fantastic. Thank you. So yeah, a good few comments coming in there, just thanking us for the session, but a very, very good point here by Adele, kind of reinforces what we were discussing there earlier on. So setting winning as the only acceptable result is setting teams up for failure.
Well, yeah, and don't get me wrong, winning is important. Winning is part of development. Of course, winning brings confidence, breeds confidence, 100%. But I always believe if you do the right things in training, you keep working on the right things in training, and you keep focusing on your own individual players and your as a team performance and trying to raise your own standards, if you're good enough, you'll win at the weekend. You'll win at the weekend. But if we focus on the winning, then we may not then put the appropriate focus on what we should be doing in terms of how are we going to get the ball up the field, how are we going to defend without the ball, or kickouts. So things like that. So I do agree with you. I think winning is important. Of course, it does help with motivation and confidence, but we need to focus on what we need to do to achieve that first. That's all I'm saying.
Brilliant. Francis, psychosocial strand and importance of greeting players as they arrive at training. Tom says he's definitely going to refocus on communicating with the players. And there's a
webinar there, guys. There's a webinar on our LGFA. This is going to be on our LGFA YouTube channel for you to view and watch over the coming days. And I would advocate you to watch over, because sometimes, you probably missed on certain items. But also, we have other webinars that focused on questioning in your session in terms of planning a session. So, Tom, give a look at that. There's a webinar specifically on that. But look, we hope you enjoyed tonight. I enjoyed tonight, Vinny. I hope you enjoyed tonight. We hope that you took something from tonight that you can take to your next session. And look, we have other webinars coming up from a coaching education perspective. I think the next one is using the appropriate language in a coaching session, which would be good in terms of how you communicate with your players. So, Tom, that'll be a good one for that as well. But Vinny, is there any final word you'd like to say before we wrap up this evening?
No, just thanks so much everybody for tuning in. As William said, this particular recording will be going up on our website and on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to share with your coaching team as well, and anybody within your club or maybe in your neighbouring clubs that you feel would benefit from viewing it. But I hope that you took something away from this evening. I thank William for taking the lead, and super interaction from everybody as well. There's nothing worse than coming on a webinar sometimes and you don't get that interaction from the audience, but like the chat has been absolutely hopping, the Q&A. I hope that we've got around to most people's points as well, and we've had some fantastic feedback just to finish off there as well. So thank you everybody for your engagement this evening, and look, tune into those other ones. The menu is up there on the website, so pick and choose which exact ones you want to tune into that are most relevant to you and your team.
Exactly. And guys, don't be afraid to make contact with myself and Vinny directly through the LGFA if you want. No problem. For any questions or queries, we'd be more than happy to try our best to give advice. We'd also love to hear from you and any strategies you put in place that we may be able to apply to future webinars. So on that note, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you over the coming weeks, and best luck with your coaching practice. Thank you.
Go on, Liv.